Stoneforge Mystic.
Okay.
I played standard formats where you could call it Arcbound Ravager.
Also true.
I played standard formats where you could call it Thawing Glaciers.
Ugh.
But I don't think that you could call this format Siege Rhino. Yes, Abzan is going to be all over the place. I expect Siege Rhino decks between the mid-range and the control and the aggro builds to be the most popular decks in our second day of competition on the balance. But there's a lot going on in standard right now.
I'm going to turn it over to our resident Siege Rhino master.
God, don't do that.
Matthias Hunt, not casting Dig Through Time anymore. I'm still not okay with this. Now, obviously, there are a lot of different ways you can go with Siege Rhino decks. As Patrick mentioned, you've got control builds, you've got mid-range builds, you've got the Abzan aggro decks. All of them have one thing in common. They're casting Siege Rhino in their deck. Abzan Charms are in there, Thoughtseizes are in there. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of slant towards maybe the more controlling versions?
Right, so what I actually think we've seen in this is you had some defined Abzan aggro, mid-range, and control in the past. The aggro decks that were longer on creatures, the control decks didn't play as many, they played main deck sweepers. I think what we've actually seen is all of them kind of meet in the center. Your aggro decks have gotten bigger and your control decks have gotten smaller. And a lot of that has been because of the Den Protector package that came out in our most recent set. So what I expect to see are these kind of Abzan aggro style decks that we saw do really well in the last month on the Open Series. So yes, they can play that aggressive start. They do play, I think, around 20 creatures, and then they bridge their way to being the control in the matchups they need to be by playing cards like Den Protector in addition to their Abzan Charms. I think your Read the Bones Sweepers style Abzan decks, I don't expect to see too much of this weekend.
It's been really interesting because, the Den Protector Deathmiss Raptor package that everyone talks about, now, it doesn't always have to include Deathmiss Raptor, but most of the time it does. You'll find Den Protector more often than not in these decks. If you follow on social media, any of the people that are playing this tournament, everyone's just like, all right, who has Den Protectors and Deathmiss Raptors for me? So I expect to see that Megamorph package between these Abzan decks. Now, you can, of course, find it in other decks like Bant and stuff like that, but I think this is going to be really what kind of praise over this particular tournament in addition to Siege Rhino.
It's a big deal, and to Matthias' point of the decks meeting in the middle, Den Protector is a big consequence of that because it's so much more powerful to be recurring spells than creatures.
Yep.
And so once Den Protector is in your deck, you have this huge incentive to add more removal spells. And as you mentioned, everything, whether you're control or whether you're aggro, is still kind of getting souped up and pushed towards the middle. You're also recurring creatures naturally because of Deathmiss Raptor, which is more and more incentive for your Den Protectors to be getting back as many spells as possible.
We're going to talk about a Dig Through Time deck now. We're going to move on to Esper Dragons, a deck that has gone through the ebb and flow of Standard. You think, of course, of the Pro Tour Dragon Stark here, and then the Grand Prix afterward, where this deck at Grand Prix Krakow, it just ran over the tournament. And then at the Open Series in Cleveland, where Ross Merriam won with a Bant Heroic, Gerard Fabiano, a deep run of the tournament, really dominated the tournament until being knocked out by Ross when he was playing Esper Dragons. It has kind of subsided a little bit since then. It is the go-to Dig Through Time deck in the format, and there's no arguing the power level of Dragonlord Ojutai, but where do we think this deck stacks up? I'm going to start with you, Matthias, because even though you've switched to Siege Rhino, you're still a blue player at heart. I know you like casting Dig Through Time. Is this a deck that people should be playing this weekend?
So I think a lot of times when you talk about formats, you say, do you want your control decks to be finesse or do you want them to be power? Is this a mid-range format or a control one? And I think when we first saw Esper Dragons come onto the scene, blue-black was okay, and then you looked at these Esper Dragons, which were much less of a control deck and more of like this Esper mid-range deck. And I think Esper Dragons is actually in a poor spot right now because what I see a lot of players doing, and what I want to see them doing, is playing even more mid-range styles. So Esper Dragons got really good because it started at 3 Ojutais and 2 Havens. Then we saw it go to 4 Ojutais and 2 Havens, then 4 Ojutais and 3 Havens. And I think what people are doing is they're taking this mid-range Esper deck, and I would expect to see it become even more mid-range. We start to see these 4-color dragon decks, these 5-color dragon decks that are all still playing 4 Ojutais and 3 Havens at the top. And if you want to beat something like the Abzan controls of the format, just having this huge number of dragon threats is a great way to attack the format.
It seems to be a pretty popular thing that people are doing right now. I know Jerry Thompson's been working on like Sultai Dragons, where it's like, a Sultai deck and then it has like Dragonlord Dramoka, and Dragonlord Atarka, and Dragonlord Ojutai, and like Havens to make it all work, maybe Crucibles as well. What do you think about this type of strategy?
Well, I think it's a natural evolution for the deck given where the metagame's at, because the blue deck doesn't have the best inevitability in the format right now. We've seen Esper Dragon decks, when they're in the real control route, be able to get it shop online, play some stuff, resolve a Dig Through Time, and still lose because Den Protector and Deathmiss Raptor allows a variety of decks to hang around even as the game progresses. This is not like last year's Standard where if you resolved a big Sphinx's Revelation, the game was over no matter what you're playing against. You have to work really hard, and the green decks can hang around with you. So I do respect a lot what Matthias just said. I think it's a natural evolution for the deck to play a lot more to the board and try to overpower decks that way. because the card advantage route is not something that these blue control decks have a monopoly on anymore in this format. Den Protector and Death Misraptor makes that sort of position a lot more challenging. When Dig Through Time, yes, it's a powerful card, but at the end of the day, it's only a 2-for-1, and the green decks can produce that all day long.
Now, some decks have interest in going long. You mentioned green decks, 2-for-1s all day with Den Protector, Death Misraptor. You know, you can go a little bit bigger with Dragonlord Tarka and what have you. Same thing can be said for these Esper Dragon decks or whatever variant of Dragon decks people are playing. Deck that has no interest in going long is a Tarka Red. This deck wants to get you dead and get you dead fast. I played the deck in Portland. I liked it a lot, obviously. The top 8, whatever, that's fine. But just playing the deck and playing the games, you can tell this deck is really powerful. This is not like one of your old red decks where it's like, I hope I get the right matchups because then I'm good to go. This is, my cards are powerful. These cards are no joke. I can go toe-to-toe with Siege Rhino thanks to the printing of Roast. Portling Outburst lets me go wide, and as we have seen many times with the Tarkus command, that card can win games that no other card can win from a red deck. What do we think about that deck for this weekend?
I think this is a great deck. And as you mentioned before, often the mono red decks have felt like they're a matchup deck in the format, or I really hope that I'm on the play and have Goblin Guy because that's the only powerful card in my deck.
Yep.
And if you look up and down the roster of a Tarka Red, it's all powerful cards, all standard-worthy stuff. The curve of creatures is very good. You have Stoke the Flames and a Tarkus command, very powerful ways to top off your curve. To me, the interesting thing about this deck, the vulnerability is that green mana is not free. Yeah. You're playing with a lot of copies of Mana Confluence. The Forest is a disaster to draw if it's anywhere early on. You can speak to this from your experiences in Portland.
Not great.
And if people play mono red instead of a Tarkus command, that's literally the only reason, because a Tarkus command is so powerful in the deck. Just the opportunity cost of adding a second color to a deck that's cheap with a bunch of red 1-drops and 2-drops. It's pretty rough, and Mana Confluence also damages a lot of your aggressive matchups as well. So interesting to see where people land on a Tarka Red versus Mono Red. Both decks have their advocates, but I think we're going to see a pretty healthy portion of those two decks combined in the tournament.
Let's imagine you're coming into this tournament, and you know, if you're playing your Siege Rhino deck or if you're playing your blue deck, coming into the Season 2 Invitational, and given what the players play here, because we've covered enough of these things, to know kind of maybe they kind of avoid getting paired against red decks, or I hope I don't get paired against Tom Ross, as we saw him win last year with Boss Sly in this particular room. If you're preparing for this tournament, are you saying to yourself, I'm going to play against Tarka Red because that deck is so good that people are going to play it? Or are you saying, I don't think many people are going to play it?
Well, so I actually think this is a great tournament to play a Tarka Red, first of all. What I expect a lot of players, like I said, these 5-color dragon decks, 4-color dragon decks, I expect to be pretty popular. This to me feels like it's going to be a mid-range brawl of a meta, and I really do like a Tarka Red in that matchup. Now that said, if people are on mid-range decks, you start to look at sideboards. You know, I think if I want to show up to this mid-range fight with a mid-range deck, then I have to respect a Tarka Red, and maybe I have to just bite the bullet and put 3 Arishan Clerics in my sideboard, or just devote 3 to 5 cards just to a Tarka Red, because you have to pay it that level of respect if you want to play a mid-range deck in this metagame.
Yeah, I think that the Tarka Red, this is a nice change for red decks, where, you know, I think of, you know, in the Jund format where Quenchable Fire was a card that the red decks were playing, just because, you know, people couldn't pay the blue mana, and you needed that card to deal 6 damage against a Jund deck. Nowadays, the red card, there are so many red cards that, you know, a card like Firedrinker Satyr isn't even seen play.
Yep.
Which I know breaks your heart, because, you know, the cards are just so good now. So again, I'm with both of you guys. I think a Tarka Red is just a legitimately good deck that people should probably be playing this weekend, but we'll see, because you think of the players who play in these tournaments and what do well. Outside of Tom Ross, you know, I can't really think of someone who's like, that guy's on red. Doesn't really happen.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that's nice for Tarka Red and Mono Red is what Den Protector and Death Misraptor does. People are incentivized to take a lot of the random raw power out of their deck and win the late game just on Den Protector and Death Misraptor. So you see fewer Elspeths in people's lists, for example. You see fewer 5 and 6 mana Haymakers. None of those cards are the best against mono red, but if you're able to stabilize the board, a lot of those cards are capable of winning the game on their own. When you're sort of fumbling around with Den Protector and Death Misraptor and trying to generate value that way, that's not a very good recipe against mono red or a Tarka Red that's trying to kill you on the 4th or 5th turn. It's very hard to leverage those card advantage tools, especially when you don't have your 5 and 6 mana power cards to lock mono red out of the game. So I think that direction for the green decks, very profitable for mono red.
We got 2 decks left to cover. We're actually going to kind of group them as one. It's probably easier to do so. Green-red decks, there are couple different ways, that you can go. There are Green-Red Dragons. I think Chris Van Meter has won at the Open Series in Syracuse, where he dominated that tournament with, of course, Stormbreath Dragon. What else for Chris? Right. And then, of course, you can go much, much bigger with Green-Red Devotion. That's, of course, a Nykthos engine. You've got Whisperwood Elemental, Dragonlord Atarka, which actually goes across both of these decks. Coming into this particular weekend, there have been murmurs of people looking to move towards that devotion strategy. The idea here is, I don't think people are playing Blue Black Control. I don't think people are playing Esper Dragons. I don't have to worry about a card like Perilous Vault or Crux of Fate. And if that's the case, Green Red Devotion and Grand Dragons is a very, very good deck. I will ask Matthias, I'll start with you. How do you feel about like this kind of, what I would describe as much more narrow and linear strategy of what it's doing? I mean, if Devotion is good, it's great, and if it's bad, it's horrible.
Well, I already said I'm on Team CVM this weekend, just off Modern, but I'm going to carry that one into Standard as well.
Okay.
If you're on Green Devotion, as I like it this weekend, as we talked about, you know, if there's mid-range decks and then these Esper Dragons decks, and it's a big slog fight of mid-range, Devotion's going to be great. We've seen this before. We saw it in the top 4 of our first Invitational. We saw Chris Anderson make that one with a Green Devotion deck, and he was going through lots of these decks like Sultai Reanimator, Obzon midrange. He was really just beating those decks in the Standard portion of our tournament. I would expect to see a lot of the same, so I like Green Devotion because I like how it matches up against a lot of the mid-range decks of the format. Now, Green Red Dragons, I'm not as much of a fan of, because I think as we get into this mid-range fight, the more powerful decks, your Esper Dragons, your 4-color Dragons, your Obs on mid-range, I think do have the chance to overpower the Green-Red deck. To have this early Dragon in Green-Red Dragons, you are paying the cost of, well, playing cards like Rattleclaw Mystic or maybe some Voyaging Satyr style cards. And when you have these less powerful cards in your deck, I don't like you in the mid-range matchup as much.
How do you feel about these strategies?
I want to echo Matthias' sentiments. I'm not a big fan of the Dragons deck. I just don't think that deck lines up very well against Hero's Downfall plus Den Protector.
Sure.
I think beating those kind of decks is pretty challenging for a lot of Dragon strategies. I think Devotion has the tools and the card advantage and just the raw power to be able to slog through that. So for Devotion this weekend, I'm on board. I would stay away from Dragons.
Yeah, Devotion is very, very interesting, as I said, because when it is good, it is great, and when it is bad, it is pretty poor. You know, if there is a heavy influx of Blue-Black control, Esper Dragons leaning more towards like being a control strategy and not a mid-range strategy, that's where it's really poor. But you know, murmurs on the floor are a bunch of players saying, well, if Obviers are going to play Obzon and try to get edges in the Obzon mirror, I want to be on Genesis Hydra, Whisper Elemental, and a bunch of stuff that they can't beat, because I can just go bigger than them.
Oh, you can definitely win the late game. Yeah. I mean, you have so much card advantage. You generate a lot of mana. You have a ton of haymakers. You really tax their removal spells. If they're trying to beat the other Obzon decks, those decks are looking for different tools for the mirror match than what you would want against Green Devotion. The sweepers are not very good against Obzon. Your sweepers, your Crux of Fates, your End Hostilities, you really need that against Green Devotion. It wouldn't surprise me if a lot of the Obzon decks were moving away from having a lot of those cards in the list, maybe 1 throughout the 75. And if you're making those kind of calls, then Green Devotion's excellent.
Now, of course, the three of us, we're not playing in the tournament. We're bringing you the coverage all weekend long here from the Origins Game Fair in Columbus. Though on our way out the door, I will ask my 2 partners here. Matthias, you're playing in this tournament. Your weapons of choice for Modern and Standard.
Modern is going to be Amulet Plume. I put in the 200 plus matches for it. It's a tier 1 deck. I don't see any great reason to not play it this weekend. Standard though, I think I would move away from Obzon for this weekend. And you know, I would try to win the mid-range fight. I'd be on 5-color Dragons.
Patrick.
Mono Red in Standard and Teamer Twin in Modern.
I would be playing Green Red Tron in Modern because duh. And for Standard, I'd be playing a Tartar Red.
Hey, I think Tron might be a good call this weekend.
I think it's risky.
There's a lot of Chun, a lot of Obzon, and if those decks aren't coming with things like Sowing Salt on the sideboard, if they think Fulminator Mage is enough to make that matchup okay, they're in for a rude awakening if they play against Tron, because you need some real haymakers if you're playing these mid-range 3-color removal decks if you want to have a good matchup there.
We're going to see how things break out here. The tournament's about to begin here in just a moment. Players, as you can see, are shuffling behind us and getting ready to sit down. So we are all done here.